to do something that I haven't really ever done before. I really don't like when people say like, "Oh, I'll probably won't even post this video." I'm not sure I'm going to post this video. It's more for my own process. I'm investigating something, and for those of you that know me, I'm a talking processor. And sometimes when I can talk things out, it's where I start channeling and I can get deeper insights beyond what my own knowledge knows. And I want to record it because I just don't want to miss anything. So we'll see if this makes it to the interwebs. I don't know if we're going to go that far. But anyway, I'm on the discovery hunt for the core wound and how it actually controls every aspect of our life. And that's a bold statement, but I actually do feel that. I feel like the core wound is the puppet master pulling all of the strings in order to guide our survival from its perspective, mind you. Like it sees danger differently than we would see it in a conscious level. And so I just kind of want to break it down just to see if I'm onto something that actually makes sense. And then if at the end of this video, if it feels like that is true and accurate for where we are in our process, then maybe I'll post it. So imagine you're a child and you have an environment that feels unstable, unsafe, unsure, or a combination of those. Sometimes the child can perceive things that aren't factual. So right now we're speaking to the child's mind, right? The way the child perceives its environment, okay? Let's say you have a parent or a caregiver that's not very kind to you in whatever way that is. From the child's perspective, in the child's mind, they're going to see this person as unsafe, unstable, unsure. And the child doesn't understand why that's happening. And so there's almost a self-reflective wound that happens right there. So that parent is being what they're being towards the child. And then the child is going to make a decision. I bet it's because I'm not good enough. I bet I'm unworthy. It must be because I'm unlovable. The child is going to reflect back to self because it's really their only point of reference at that juncture in that age because the point of reference is usually to the parent. If that's unsafe, then they'll reflect back to self. They are being this way. It's probably because it's my fault. And so that child will kind of make a decision, a moment. They said something, they did something, or didn't do or didn't say, right? It's also sometimes in the absence of action. The child will reflect back into what I call the core wound statement. Oh, that's happening because I'm unworthy. I'm useless. I'm too much, right? You kind of get where I'm going. The statement is very personalized. Everyone will have their version of a statement, but almost always that statement will filter down to a value issue, being not good enough, not smart enough, I'm too much, like where the child is questioning value. Okay. And so that locks in as that wound. Oh, this is happening, I bet, because of this. Okay. Now, then in our divinity, in our divine spiritual wisdom side of things, we know that's not true. We know that's not true, especially children, because they're so close to that spiritual realm. They haven't quite yet been indoctrinated in the world and forgotten their magic. So they're actually pretty close to the memory of being divine. So when the parent gives the message in action or in words or in the lack thereof, that you should question your value, the wound of the child is going to go, oh, I bet that's why. But then something also comes in and it goes, that can't be true. That's not true. And so now we have a conflict. The child has conflict inside of them. I'm getting this message, But that can't be true. So that conflict then turns into, mm, I'm going to prove it. I'm going to prove that that's not true. Watch me. I'm going to prove it. Now, this is where it kicks on in the child, the psychology, the archetypal pattern of the people pleaser, the rescuer, the fixer, the peacekeeper, right? These archetypes that we tend to take on because we're adjusting and we're adapting to something that feels unsafe, unsure, unstable. So the child will then start contorting themselves and creating a pattern of behavior that, for the most part, works. Oh, I made them laugh. Okay, I'm gonna make them laugh all the time. So now you've got the comedian of the family. Like, oh, I gave them a compliment and they really liked that. That worked. I'm just gonna give and give and give. So those behaviors really set up in childhood because we're simply adapting to a situation that feels bigger than us, right? And so, of course, right? Of course. So like we get to take a breath around that. We get to kind of go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like have some kindness about how those patterns got set up in that moment, right? So we feel this message. We know that can't be true, but there is a part of us that's afraid it might be true. Oh my God, what if they're right? I don't feel like that's true, but what if it is true? And so now it's another layer of that conflict. And so then it kicks into, I'm going to prove them wrong. Okay. So we gather the evidence in the world from that point on, especially in our teenage, young adult years. So the child has been adapting their whole life and contorting and shape-shifting into the role that has gotten them by, and it works, and so we stick with it, right? That's our survival strategy. So I'm glad it's there. But now that child develops into a teenager, young adult, right? Now it looks like their personality. And then in the subconscious, because we're trying to prove that person wrong, we then go out into the world and try to collect other people to give us the validation that that statement's not true. That's the core wound in action. So this is happening in subconscious. We are not aware that we are doing it this way, but that core wound is saying, you might be worthless. They said you were worthless. It might be true. And then, no, 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 that's not true, but it might be true. What if it's true? Oh my God, it's true. And so now there's a compulsion, there's an urgency, there's a push to get into the world and prove that person wrong. You following? So we go, depending on the statement, okay? So like, let's say for some people, it might be, I'm stupid, I'm not smart enough. So they may go and get all the PhDs they can stack up. They might go get all the things to prove that they're not stupid or you're unlovable. They may go and marry 10, 15 times to find someone to love them enough, right? You follow? The core wound statement, which is very individualized, matters because it's the fuel propelling you in life. That's the puppet master. The core wound is in the child, but it's the statement that's the fuel source. That's the compulsion. That's the thing that's motivating. It's the motive for all of your decisions and choices in life. So that statement matters. And it takes some time to find that. I definitely can help people with that. Then you notice how it's showing up, right? How we show up in life, we're trying to prove that person wrong. See, they validated me. See, they love me. See, I am smart enough, right? So we're kind of subconsciously always doing the see, I told you so Problem with that is when we go external for validation, it's a temporary dopamine hit, doesn't last. One person goes, "You are amazing," and we get to go, "See, I told you so." All right, the dopamine is the I get to be right in this moment, but it's temporary. And the problem that sets up is now it's an addiction. Because it's temporary, it's a temporary dump of dopamine, feels good in the moment, but it doesn't last. We have to go find another person. Ah, and then another person. Ah, on and on and on. Years and years and years and years. All because we don't know that core wound is actually pulling the strings, and it goes back to the original source. Okay? So this sets up our pattern. This sets up the people pleaser, the fixer, the rescuer archetype. It exacerbates that pattern. It worked over here, it needs to work over here. And so that's where it starts looking like our personality because oh my gosh, she's so great. She just gives gifts all the time. She's so nice. And oh my God, I love her. Yeah, that's the core wound in play. The people pleaser, core wound, the fixer, the rescuer, the peacekeeper, the comedian. All of these archetypes can be traced back to the core wound. Now, I want to drop in right here. It doesn't mean you can't be those things. It doesn't mean that they are all inherently bad or wrong. So I want to make that clear. These archetypes aren't inherently wrong. There's just a part of that archetype that's not working for you. There's a component, like if you take a pie chart, there's one slice that harms you. So doing core wound work is about discovering the part that actually works for you, but finding the part that's working against you, because that part causes you to self-abandon over and over and over again. The rest of it is fine. It can be a superpower. We love those things. Got it. But there's a part that causes self-abandonment. When we self-abandon, this is very important. Every time you self-abandon, you are spending your value on someone else. Every time you self-abandon, when you leave your body to care for other people, when you forego your boundaries and say yes when you mean no, when you help and you can't help, when you give energy and you don't have energy, when you give money and you don't have money, every time that compulsion causes you to come out of your body to cater to the other person over your own well-being, you are spending value. You are giving them your value. Very important. Because remember, this core wound statement is value-based. Okay? Feel it. It's value-based. So if you wonder if you have value and now you're spending all your value, you are stuck in a hole that never lets you go. You are hooked in this addictive tendency of seeking value, but always giving it away. You're always in a deficit. Your bank account is in the red. Always. You never fill it up enough to get back into the black. You follow? Mm-hmm. Mm. I actually just want to pause with that because yum. Okay. So now we're in the world and we're compulsively finding people to validate, but it's temporary because it's dopamine. And you're spending value, so you're never really receiving value. So you never actually believe your value, which means you have to keep finding people to give you the hit of dopamine. Do you see how you're giving away 100% for 25%? You're never going to fill up your bank account. You're never going to feel valuable because you're always spending it. Okay. So let me pause because I have pages of notes. I have been on fire with this conversation. Okay. In this work, again, we're not after what is inherently right, what is inherently wrong. It's all bad, it's all good. No, we're looking for the part that causes you to self-abandon. What part of you? Where's the moment when you fall into the pattern of self-abandonment? And there's a whole process that I take people through that's way too long for this video, honestly. Here's the moral of the story. You see how I want to say this. If seeking the validation for the temporary dopamine hit is addictive, a dopamine is addictive, temporary, which means it doesn't last, and every time you self-abandon, you're paying someone else your value. Here's the antidote. When you choose self over the comfort of other people, you are putting in a deposit of value. So many times in spiritual practices and journeys, like we've heard, like, oh, you have to own your value, you have to claim your value, believe in yourself. Like, they're beautiful words, but I'm a mechanical person. I'm an engineer mind. I want to know exactly how do we do that. You can't just say, I'm just going to believe in my value. We aren't wired like that. Those are toxic positivity affirmation type things. They don't stick because you have a lifelong habit of wondering if you even freaking have value. Turning around and just going, I believe in my value is not going to make it stick. It won't land. It won't come into your embodied experience. It'll be a great concept and it'll stay up here in this little head bubble space. It won't actually come down. So rather than chasing, how do I get my value? Figuring out like, well, what do I do to be valuable, right? Because you've already tried all the things that weren't working. It ends up being a byproduct. It ends up being a nice surprise. Every time you choose yourself, every time you practice embodiment and you choose to stay in your own body. And I mean that in a literal sense. I don't mean it in a woo-woo way. I mean when you literally leave your body to be hypervigilant and cross over to the room and fawn over everybody that needs something from you. That's self-abandonment. You're literally coming out of the body to go across the room. When you practice staying in, when you practice being right here, when you disrupt the pattern of, oh, that compulsion, oh, but they need me. When you get your core wound statement and you realize, oh, that's what I've been doing, now you watch for the pattern to emerge because it's inevitable. So you're watching for the pattern to show up. When you disrupt the pattern and you don't go into the default, you're making a deposit of value. You're putting it back in. You're claiming self. You're choosing self over your survival mechanism. Because understand, you're working, that the core wound works from the child's mind. The child's mind is terribly irrational. In the adult version of us, we know all of this is bullshit. We know that's not true, but it's the child that's in control in that moment. Believing the core wound, making up that statement, and now I've got to prove it, right? So the child mind is the one in charge there. And so we've got to kind of look at it in that way. So if I go out because they need me, that's not true. We know that consciously, but we don't know that in a wounded way, right? So you go, oh, wait, they don't need me. Let me just take a breath. Let me come back into myself. Ooh, let me just be right here. Every time you do that, you make a deposit of value. You don't spend it, you hold it. You deposit it in your own self. Now you have your own value. You don't need to go out to get the dopamine hit. So the value ends up accumulating by proxy, by happenstance, because you weren't focused on it directly. You were just simply not trying to abandon yourself. that is what accumulates the internal value. Yeah. And then the end result of that, as I kind of like extrapolate that and I go into like real life circumstances, when you realize it's simply simple, not easy, when you realize you're simply trying to prove someone wrong, they said it, they did it, they didn't say it, they didn't do it, I'll show them. It breaks the spell of that wound being compulsive because it's the motive. The motive is to prove them wrong. And once you like map your own personal core wound journey out, you realize what's happening. And education is power. I am a firm believer. This is why I love the way my brain works because my brain wants the steps. I want to see the cogs and the wheels and the springs and the rods. I want to see how that shit works because it's in the mechanism that everyone goes through this, by the way. It's just flowered with your own language and your own core wound statement. But the process is the same for everyone. That's what's so fascinating about it. Once you see the way it plays out, where it comes from, and you get that core wound statement, you now are able to unravel a lifetime of past wounds and future probability of more wounds. This is why I say core wound work ends in freedom. Freedom from the programmed subconscious survival child mind, and it puts you in the driver's seat of your own freaking life. I stand by that. I'm 100% clear how important this work is. And I think that's why I wanted to do a video on it because I am sick to death of posting on social media. I am sick to death of trying to do introductory workshops. This work is very specific and it's for specific people. It's not for everybody. Not everybody is ready for this work. I am well aware of that. Because here's the other thing of this. When people talk about like, oh, I want to be on a spiritual journey. I want to be on a personal development journey, right? It's like you're on this mountain and this is all you know. And it's comfortable and you know that inside and out, you're like, I'm good, master of this mountain. Then you look over and you're like, oh, what's that mountain? Oh, I want that one. Let's be on a spiritual journey. Let's be on a personal development journey. And then you leave the mountain you know. You have to go through the valley to get to the other mountain. This valley is hard. It's not pretty. It's messy AF because you're deconstructing all of the things that got put in place on this mountain. Your entire life of programs, coping mechanisms, default settings, survivalist. This is the deconstruction that is going to get you here. So it's not for everybody. I am starting to be very, very clear. I have known this for a while anyway. I'm not for everybody. I have a very specific, particular skill set of getting straight to the core of the wound, minus all the bullshit. All the other stuff is noise. All the other stuff is symptoms. I want to know the wound. We've spent enough time in this periphery of, well, maybe if I meditate more, maybe if I do an oracle reading, maybe if I get more crystals, maybe if I go do this, maybe that's symptom recovery. That's taking care of the I feel uncomfortable and I'm gonna go feel better. And I'm not knocking them. They have their place. But I don't work like that. That's great. I love it. I do those things too. Love it. But I'm always got my eye on what's the core issue. I'm efficient. If it can be anything, be efficient because that's what it is. I want to get to the valley and I want to deconstruct because I want that mountain. And for me, core wound conversation is exactly the way. Because if you just pause for a second and even just remotely possibly tap into that part of you, you'll see just how much it controls you. People have whole careers based on their core wound. People have very specific relationships because of their core wound. People seek out trauma bonding because of their core wound statement. We are driven by the statement and trying to prove it wrong and going out into the world to get our dopamine hit. If I taught nothing else in my entire 20 years, if I taught nothing else for now on, that would free billions of people. Because what is it worth to you to understand the subconscious programming that's actually in charge, pulling the strings, and not only causing you to make decisions and to make choices, but also manifesting and drawing things in? You will draw in people that match your core wound so that you can continue the practice. If this parent said you were unworthy, you'll draw in partners, friends, bosses, collaborators that all have that same programming because you are familiar with it, but you're also trying to work it out in a weird way. Because in the end, when you know your statement and then you're aware of who you're trying to prove wrong, you no longer need to seek it. You now know how to put that value in your own bank. And then there are skills, right? There are skills of capacity, nervous system regulation, trauma healing, right? The shadow work of it. This is the valley. This is the drudgery. This is the shit that not everybody is built for, right? I don't fluff things up. Like this is hard. And this is the space that matters because so many times we're trying to jump over that space. We're trying to pole vault from one mountain to the other, and we don't understand why we keep falling back on our face. Because you can't skip the valley. You can't skip this part of the deal. There's no spiritual bypassing here. There's no fluffy bunny shit. There's no, like, I just want to ride my Pegasus across and get to that next mountain. Sorry, that's not the way it works. Now, this can be efficient and can be easier than you think, but you still got to go through it. But then you make it to this mountain and now you have freedom. And now you realize how your mechanism is set up. Now you have the opportunity to make different choices. When you see the map of your makeup, when you see the core wound flow chart within your system, education is power. You're able to make different choices. Unraveling years and years and years of that child's mind believing a certain way. You unravel those wounds and then you no longer need them. They no longer can sustain within your new field because you now are not feeding them. They starve and wither and fall away appropriately. Mm. I do believe I really love that. I think I will post this video. It's a big deal. I'm going to be teaching some core wound classes. I don't know when yet. I've got one coming up, but it's not feeling like it's going to happen. I'll drop a link in the description if you want to keep in touch with when the core wound classes are coming. Yeah. And in the meantime, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like if you're open to commenting below, let me know what came up for you. I'm researching, I'm collecting data. I want to understand because I'm really close to cracking this code. I'm really close to it. More than likely I have, but I love hearing feedback. So if you have a thought that came up or a feeling that you noticed, or oh my gosh, that makes so much sense for me, this is what I understand, I'd love to hear it. So pop it in the chat, put it in the comment section, share this video with anybody that you think might find it interesting. And thanks for letting me ramble today. Appreciate you. Bye.